Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jasudanandana Rajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good morning, devotees, Prabhus and Prabhus. Today is a very auspicious day, the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So we're going to dedicate part of the class to read some of his works and talk about him a little bit. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasta Prayeshu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamas Loke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So we're reading the 5th canto, the 1st chapter, and the verse is, number 13. Bhavaya nashaya chakarma kartum shukaya mohaya sadabhaya sukaya dukaya cha deha yogam avyaktadishtam janatang gadhati. Synonyms: Bhavaya for birth, nashaya for death, cha also karma activity, kartum to do, shokaya for bereavement, Mohaya for illusion, Sada always, Bhayaya for fear, Sukhaya for happiness, Dukhaya for distress, Cha also, Deha Yogam, connection with the material body. Avyakta by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tishtam, directed, Janata, the living entities, Anga, O Priyavrata, Dhate, accept. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. My dear Priyavrata, by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities accept different types of bodies for birth and death, activity, lamentation, illusion, fear of future dangers, and happiness and distress. Purport. Every living entity who has come to this material world has come here for material enjoyment. But according to his own karma activities, he must accept a certain type of body given to him by material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Stated in Bhagavad Gita 3:27, Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha. Everything is being done by Prakriti, material nature, under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Modern scientists do not know why there are varieties of bodies in 8,400,000 forms. The fact is that all these bodies are ordained for the living entities by the Supreme Personality of Godhead according to the living entities' desires. He gives the living entities freedom to act as they like, but on the other hand, they must accept a body according to the reactions of their activities. Thus, there are different types of bodies. Some living entities have short durations of life, but are lived for fantastic durations. Every one of them, however, from Brahma down to the ant, acts according to the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is sitting in everyone's heart, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sarvasya Chaham Vidhi Sani Vishto Mata Smriti Jnanam Apohanam Cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. It is not a fact, however, that the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives direction to certain living entities in one way and other living entities in another way. The truth is that every living entity has a certain desire, and the Supreme Lord gives him a chance to fulfill it. The best course, therefore, is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and act according to his desire. One who does so is liberated. The verse again. My dear Priyavrata, by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities accept different types of bodies for birth and death, activity, lamentation, illusion, fear of future dangers, and happiness and distress. Om Agyana Timirandasya Kinanjana Shalakaya Chaksur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaham. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayati Grim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande. Shigurun Dinataranam Paramananda Mahadavam. Shri Chaitanyam Ishvaram. So let's go to the first quote from Srila Prabhupada from the Bhagavad Gita 3:27. That goes, Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha Ahankara Vimudatma Kartaham Iti Manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. In the purport, Prabhupada says, two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there is a wide gulf difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he's the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is a symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is a creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesha, or the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karuti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkipatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramananda Maravam Shri Chaitanya Mishwaram Vanchakalpataruyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanivyo Vaishnavivyo Namo Namaha. This is one of the favorite activities of a living entity, to take credit for things that they don't do. This is common among all living entities, and they've been working pretty hard from the beginning of time, and they've been taking credit for things that are simply a combination of the material modes of nature that are forcing everybody to act according to basically their own desires. However, merit takes prominent place, as one may want something but doesn't deserve it. So material nature won't reciprocate in that way. Well, you have to earn it first. So in the verse here that Prabhupada is quoting from 327, says the spirit so bewildered by the influence of false ego thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. It's as simple as a child that is there is the father and tells the child, "Why don't you push a car so I can get it started?" And then the child goes to the back of the car and starts pushing, but he doesn't realize that the father is right next to him, and also with his hands on the trunk of the car, and he's moving it. Whether the child thinks it's me, it's obviously I am doing this. So in the same way, we are surrounded by the modes of material nature that are doing all the work, and we are falsely thinking that we are actually the movers. So let's go to the other verse that Prabhupada quotes, 15:15. Sarvasya chaham ridi sanivishto mata smriti jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvaraham eva vedyo vedanta krid vedavid eva chaham. Krishna says, I'm seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I'm the compiler of Vedanta, and I'm the knower of the Vedas. And the purport Prabhupada says, the Supreme Lord is situated as Paramatma in everyone's heart, and it is from him that all activities are initiated. The living entity forgets everything of his past life, but he has to act according to the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is witness to all his work. Therefore, he begins his work according to his past deeds. Required knowledge is supplied to him, and remembrance is given to him, and he forgets also about his past life. Thus, the Lord is not only all-pervading, he is also localized in everyone and every individual heart. He awards the different fruitive results. He is worshipable not only as the impersonal Brahman, as Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the localized Paramatma, but as the form of an incarnation of the Vedas as well. The Vedas give the right direction to people so that they can properly mold their lives and come back to Godhead, back to home. The Vedas offer knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and Krishna, in his incarnation as Vyasadeva, is the compiler of Vedanta Sutra. The commentation of the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasadeva is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, gives a real understanding of Vedanta Sutra. Supreme Lord is so full that for the deliverance of the conditioned soul, he is the supplier and digester of foodstuff, the witness of his activity, and the giver of knowledge in the form of the Vedas, and as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, the teacher of the Bhagavad Gita. He is worshipable by the conditioned soul. Thus, God is all good. God is all merciful. So this is, it's very unfortunate that people don't take this seriously, and they don't understand, they suffer from ignorance, and they take credit for what they don't do. That's how the Lord supplies. And he even says that he's the one, he's the fire of digestion. He's actually the one providing the food, and digesting it as well. So if Krishna is not providing us with the fire of digestion, we won't be able to even eat a communion wafer or a candy. Our body will reject it. So we totally depend on the Supreme Personality of Godhead for everything. And still we are taking the credit for everything we do. This is a very unfortunate situation for the conditioned soul. So on that note, let's hear a little bit about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a phenomenal acharya and our line of disciplic succession. He was born in Jagannath Puri. I mean, we all heard this many times. So I'm gonna read some of his writing, which is incredible. I remember first time I came in contact with some of his writings was by reading I think it's a foreword to the Brahma Samhita. And his language is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It is said that he learned English from reading Shelley and Shakespeare. I'm not sure about a confirming quote about this, but his English was superb. Matter of fact, most people who have their vocabulary is not very extensive, they will have to have a dictionary in hand if they want to read Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's writings. So from one encounter, I want to actually, instead of speaking about his life, he was extremely austere, very intelligent, totally accomplished, became a scholar, and he took very seriously his vows. Matter of fact, he ate a mango that was meant to be offered when he was 5, I believe, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur mildly reprimanded him and said this was meant to be offered to the deities. So he took a vow at age 5 never to eat a mango again. And when he was offered mangoes by his disciples, he said, "Oh, I'm an offender. I can't eat that." So that's a serious personality. So there is in this book, The Ray of Vishnu, written by Rupa Vilas Das, an old friend of mine who lives in England. This is a chapter called Scholars and Indologists. So I will read from that. In Srila Saraswati Thakur, 1924, Vyasapuja address, the following passage highlights a theme that arose frequently in discussions with scholars. We do not find God in this world. The devotees who serve God out of their mercy show themselves to us. We should follow their conduct and teaching. It is the only path to our well-being. Due to our meager education and small experience, to most of us, ideas and ways of thinking of the devotees of God appear to be an edifying slave mentality. Let us not indulge in such profane ravings under the urge of mental aberration. On the contrary, our line of thought should be, let the censorious people calumniate us to their heart's content. We will not mind. Let us roll in the dust and forget everything in the ecstasy of intoxication by excessive drinking of a strong and tasty wine of the love of Lord Hari. End of quote. Srila Saraswati Thakur's references here to slave mentality can be understood to be, at least in part, the reaction of the Indian intellectuals of his time, who have been bewildered by a false presentation of their own cultural and religion. As the British has successfully brainwashed many intellectuals in their educational institutions by making them think that their religion was barbarous, backward, etc., the Indians sometimes took it that the ways of the Vaishnavas represented something useless from their past to enslave them in the stereotype fostered by the British of foolish, illiterate Hindus. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments on this in his book, The Bhagavad, Its Philosophy, Its Ethics, and Its Theology. There's a quote here. from Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. I'm going to actually skip because we don't have too much time today. We have to stop by 7:45, 7:50. So in 1929, he had a series of meetings, this is Bhaktisiddhanta, with Professor Albert E. Suthers of Ohio State University and spoke to him on a number of topics, including Vaishnavism and Christianity, transmigration, etc., etc. So here goes the dialogue. Professor Suthers, I'm going to abbreviate and said professor for him. And Professor Suthers, did the worshippers of Krishna encourage the obscenity of the engravings of many Hindu temples? Srila Sarastvati Thakur. Those who are actual worshippers of Krishna are never in favor of indecencies. All decency and morality are entirely confined to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. The highest sense of morality of the unadulterated soul consists in its love towards the oversoul. And the culmination of this pure love is found only in the devotees of Krishna. The best of the moral rules, as preached by the noble Jesus, do not come anywhere near the principles of amorous love of the devotees of Krishna for service thereof. Professor, Your Holiness seems to have taken a biased view in saying that the good moral precepts of Christ come nowhere near the morality of amorous love of the devotees of Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, certainly not. We claim to be greater and better Christians than Westerners. Our judgment is not restricted only to secular morality. The morality of the object of spiritual love transcends the supernatural morality, which again surpasses secular morality. If Christian morality is perfected thereby, then it may be said to receive proper nourishment. To a pure soul that remains situated on a transcendental moral plane of love, the secular moralities appear reduced to the smallness of pygmies. But there is not found any feeling of apathy nor attachment towards these secular moralities. On the other hand, all moralities wait like maids behind the spiritual moralities to become glorified, being permitted to serve the Lord of transcendental love. The character of a culturist of spiritual love is never devoid of morality. One hostile to morality or fallen from it can never be a spiritual man. In the blaze of the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Deva's ideal, it has been propagated that dissoluteness is not devotion. Its palpable evidence is found when we reflect on the character of Sri Chaitanya Deva or the followers at his heel. The people of the realm of the secular morality concerned with the worldly enjoyments and their renunciation will not be able to grasp in their tiniest brains how fostered by the climax of morality and how adored in the highest degree of all the morality of the universe are the amorous sports of Krishna, so much glorified by the noble clan of such high personages of strictly continent character as the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Deva, like Sri Rupa, Sanatan, Raghunath Das, Raghunath Bhatta, Sri Gopal Bhatta, etc. Professor, how can Your Holiness' statement be reconciled with the descriptions that are found about Krishna's amorous sports? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Krishna's amorous sports are not temporal, like the lustful sports of dramatic heroes and heroines like Romeo and Juliet, or even ideal spouses. Lust, as prevalent in this world, is only a mental passion, but the lust of a transcendental region has its own form. Here, lust is always goaded by the enemy, one of the six passions, whereas in the transcendental region of Krishna, the loveliness of the spiritual body of Krishna ever drives the lust for Krishna, which takes form as sublimated love for the desire to gratify the immaculate senses of Krishna. The conductor of the worldly lust is the enemy, passion, and the conductor of love is Krishna. It is the amorous sports of Krishna that have appropriateness, but there is no such consistency in the lust born of the body and mind of the jiva. Krishna's amorous sports are not to be called indecency, because it is Krishna who is the only one unrivaled enjoyer, embodiment of the real truth, and the spiritual despot. Professor, I cannot fully appreciate this. Please let me understand it a little more clearly. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Suppose there are some angles, 2 right angles, 4 right angles, etc. There is the contracted character of a corner in the acute obtuse or right angle. But in the two right angles called the straight angle, even though called an angle, there is no contractedness or want of straightness, as in the case with angles in general. Such is the case with the autocrat Krishna. There is no want of contractedness or despicable character or indecency in the perfect entity Krishna. Like the circle of 360 degrees, though the communities of enjoyers and or renouncers championing morality or immorality may, due to the meagerness of their intellect, wrongly regard the lustfulness of Krishna, the result of his despotism, which is only his, as vulgar, like that of common men and other creatures. Professor Suthers. The Gita has admitted the doctrine of a transmigration of the soul. What does your Vaishnava philosophy say about this? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. The Gita is not separate from the Vaishnava philosophy. In the Srimad Bhagavatam has been fully revealed the true import of the doctrine, viz., that the changes of birth for the soul, that of changes of birth for the soul. Christianity has disregarded the principle of change of birth on the alleged ground that if it is accepted, men will not restrain their sinful propensities, rather they will indulge in vices at their sweet will in their present life, on the expectation that they will be able to make good their sins, guilts, and wrongdoing of this life in the course of the following ones. But the Srimad Bhagavatam has crowned the principles with its true significance by means of a much fuller scientific and philosophical meaning, by giving the instruction about the urgent necessity for ardently taking up and culturing devotion to God, even while the human life, not easily available in the afterlives, is at our disposal, without spending a single moment thereof in other useless pursuits. If we do not accept the doctrine of transmigration of the soul and adopt the instruction of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we shall not be able to get over the all-devouring disaster of regarding matter as the sole object of our concern, which has kept its mouth wide open. Though most of the Christians do not admit transmigration, yet many intellectual giants of the Christian world have shown several instances of their acceptance of the doctrine. Even in the Bible, we find, and this is a quote, "And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from his birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, 'Master, who had committed the sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?'" This is from John. It is seen that even some Christian fathers clearly gave instructions about transmigration. Origen said, "It is not more," this is one of the fathers of the Christian church, "it is not more in conformity with reason that every soul, for certain mysterious reason, is introduced into a body and introduced according to its deserts and former actions. I am sure that I, such as you see me here, have lived 1,000 times, and I have come again, and now have to come again another 1,000 times," says Wolfgang von Goethe. What the Greeks call the metempsychosis, or what is transmigration in the English language, was at one time more or less admitted in ancient Greece, Egypt, and many places in the West. Some say that the apostles of Christ the Great, failing to reconcile their previous and subsequent conclusions with the doctrine of transmigration, were compelled to discard it. Yet, no rationalist among the Christians has been able to refute the doctrine on the basis of sound reasoning. On the other hand, most of them have had to admit it even. Herodotus, Pindar, Plato, etc. have all accepted it. Huxley, the illustrious scientist of the 19th century, has written in his religious work, Evolution and Ethics, quote, "None but very hasty thinkers will reject it on the ground of inherent absurdity, like the doctrine of evolution itself, viz., that of transmigration, which has its root in the world of reality and may claim such support as a great argument of analogy is capable of supplying." Professor Lutulowski has said, "I cannot give up my conviction of a previous existence on earth before my birth, and I have the certainty to be born again after my death, until I have assimilated all human experiences, having been many times male and female, wealthy and poor, free and enslaved, generally having experienced all conditions of human existence." But such transmigration theories of the empiricists of the West, or those of the Western philosophers of the 17th and 18th centuries, like Franciscus Mercurius Helmont, Lichtenberg, Lessing, Herder, Schopenhauer, etc., or of the Jalaluddin Rumi, or the Sufi sect of Persia, or of the Theosophists, or of the Indian Nyaya philosophy and the aphorism, quote, from the desire for the mother's breast milk due to the habits of a previous life, end of quote, or of a Buddhistic doctrine of annihilation in matter. These are assailable by various hostile reasonings and having their origin in inductive concepts are incomplete and imperfect. But the conclusion in this respect of the Srimad Bhagavatam is fully flawless and significant. The Vaishnava philosophy having shown the royal road to the acquirement of the highest blessedness, even in the present life, there is no need of waiting for future lives. As such, the Vaishnava philosophy is thoroughly aloof from all wrangling full of useless riddles over the doctrine of transmigration. Bhaktisiddhanta was so learned and he had a perfect memory, he would remember everything. So he just presented quotes from a scriptures that this Professor Sathers was familiar with. So at this point, the professor had to admit his lack of erudition compared to the great Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Professor, I am able to feel the super excellence of a Vaishnava philosophy among the Indian philosophies, but to my mind, the acceptance of idolatry in the Vaishnava philosophy, like the other Indian philosophies, seems to be a stigma in it. It's talking about deity worship. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, idolatry has never been accepted in the Vaishnava philosophy. On the other hand, it has been more or less accepted in the other philosophies, at least mentally, if not so in many words. In the very word Bhagavan, God, have accumulated all the excellences that are there in human and suprahuman conceptions. The existence of majesty, like the furthest most limits of both vastness and minuteness, is a characteristic of God. The second characteristic is his omnipotence. If one understands the word omnipotence to mean what is conceivable by the human intellect or what is possible for man, one is wrong. God is omnipotent because what is impossible according to the human intellect is within the ambit of the inscrutable power of God. Due to his inscrutable power, he is simultaneously both with and without form. It will be the denial of his inscrutable power if you say that he cannot have his form, or he has not his eternal form, only having a form for the time being, none in the end. By dint of his inscrutable power, he is with his eternal supportive form before a liberated soul conversant with the service of his potencies. Contemplation only on formlessness is rather unnatural and devoid of all differential excellence. God is always all good, all glory, and all beauty. His beauty is visible only to the transcendental eye. God is the transcendental reality, pure, full of sentient in essence, and sentient essence is his form. It is true that God has no material body, but he has his Sat, Chit, Ananda, transcendental body, visible only to the eye that is clear, devoid of matter. To the material eye, God is formless, but to the transcendental eye, he is with his body of Chit, or all sentience. The Murtis, prepared and worshipped by those who have not seen his Chit body of God, with their true and eternal eye cleansed with the collyrium of the love of God, are of course idols, and all the worshippers of those idols must be idolaters. The worship of Murtis of God prepared from imagination may be called idolatry. Suppose I, who have not seen Jacob, make a Murti of his out of imagination. This Murti is not the replica of his form. Besides, if Jacob is a creature of this world, whose body, mind, and soul are different from one another, his photograph, being only the replica of his material body, is different from his eternal and intrinsically true form. But God, with his Satchitananda body, is not such a thing. His body and soul are non-different from each other, nor are his name and soul, his attribute and figure, his attribute and soul, his port and soul, his port and figure, his port and attribute different. If a pure entity or a mixed soul sees that eternal form of God and receives it in its own pure receptacle, and then places this transcendental form in the world from his heart as illumining the intrinsically and essentially true form of God, that never deserves to be called an idol. Just as even by coming down to this phenomenal world, God remains untouched by the influence of Maya by dint of his inscrutable power. So does its true form too, as revealed to the unmixed entity of his devotee, remain above it, even though brought down here. For this reason, the Vaishnava philosophy terms of Sri Murti as his archavatar, the worshipable descent. The conception of God without form, in contradistinction to his essential form, is as calamitous as the falsely imagined form of God for one competent to see his true form. Such insignificant processes occur before attaining to the real entity and do only grope in the darkness. The Sri Vigraha of the Vaishnava philosophy cannot be but the direct indication of the essential form of God. By way of an imperfect comparison, it may be said to be the proxy of the essential form of God, which is beyond the cognizance of a material eye, just as there are in art and science crude representations of invisible matter. How can those that have not in their heart love of God, which is the true function of the soul, and it is the science of the true knowledge of realities, think of the Sri Murtis as other than idols? The deliberations of a Vaishnava philosophy are very fine. These have shown by true scientific analysis that they are all more or less idolaters who declare themselves as partisans either of the doctrine of no form of God or that of his material form, just as those who attribute godship to matter and worship it, like fire worshippers among the uncivilized people, or the worshippers of the planets such as Jupiter, Saturn, etc., of Greece, are crude idolaters in a similar manner of others who declare everything beyond matter as formless and become exponents of the doctrine of non-distinction, are equal or even greater idolaters. The henotheists, or worshippers of one of the Vedic deities, or the worshippers of the 5 deities called Panchapasakas, worship imaginary icons, consider them as God. According to them, God has no Satchidananda Vigraha, and as without form, there can be no subject for contemplation. To make it easy to meditate on him, some form has to be imagined. They are all idolaters. So also is the conduct of some of the yogis and others to be regarded as idolatry, who, for purifying their heart or improving the functions of the mind, imagine a God and perform practices of contemplation, etc., of some imaginary form of his. Those who consider jivas as God are the most blasphemous idolaters, because to imagine any worldly thing or form as God is idolatry. There is a world of difference between the worship of Sri Murtis, as ordained by the Vaishnava philosophy, and the doctrines of God with form and without form of the other thinkers. Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya Deva has refuted all sorts of idolatry and instructed the service of the archavatars of the all-merciful God of inscrutable potency. By now, Professor is blown away. So, unfortunately, I have to stop here, but I'm going to read something else. I was going to read from a book called Uncommon Dialogues, but I don't have the time for that. It can be done some other time. So here is a quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And this kind of rounds up the concept that he was the most intelligent being and completely awake about spiritual reality and seeing it in its whole glory and full glory. Yet, this is what he wrote. I used to think of myself as a learned scholar in mathematics and philosophy, but by my good fortune, I met my spiritual master. When he shocked me by pointing out that my great qualities, my truthfulness, my pure moral life, and my vast learning were insignificant, I realized how great he must be to consider such qualities insignificant. By his push, I could understand that there was no person as fallen and wretched as myself. I understood my actual position. Here was a great soul who placed no value on qualities such as learning and moral character, qualities I esteemed highly. I understood what an invaluable object this great personality must possess. I concluded that he was either extremely merciful or extremely proud. Thereafter, I took shelter of the Supreme Lord with humility. By the Lord's mercy, I realized that without the service and mercy of such an akinchana, I could not achieve spiritual success. When I developed that good intelligence, I received the shelter and unlimited mercy of my spiritual master, and my life became successful. Here I'm speaking about that most auspicious personality whom I have realized by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, my own spiritual master. The shock I received from my spiritual master made me realize that unless people are similarly shocked, they will not come to their senses. This was brought to my attention by my good wife. And we can see that all the knowledge and wealth and pride and any of these qualities that are disassociated from Krishna consciousness, and that there is the Vaishnava quality of humility is not present, are actually detriments to one's spiritual life. On that note, I would like to end the class, and we have literally 2 minutes for a question or a comment. So if you like to chime in now, please do it, as we have to go to the temple for the rest of the morning program. Okay.
Just want to thank you, Prabhu. That was a great class.
Thank you. It's
really
probably because I didn't say
very much.
anything of my own. I just read all the time.
Yeah. Wonderful choice. Great selections. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
We're gonna do final tongue. Wants to do this. Doing this. Doing this. Anyone would like to lead? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Ah. Saraswati. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for doing this. That's all I got. Just a lot of